You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group, together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas.
A brief warning before we start this interview with Ashley Spence. We speak plainly about sexual assault in this interview, and if you find yourself triggered by such conversation, you might want to be aware of that fact before the interview starts. Thanks, as always, for listening to Mind Over Murder.
Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
And we're joined today by victims advocate and fellow Sun Devil, Ashley Spence, here to talk to us about the DNA Justice Project. Ashley, thank you for joining us.
Thank you both so much for having me. I'm so grateful.
You have to explain what a Sun Devil is.
Ashley, you want to do the honors?
You can do this. So I'm a Sun Devil and a Longhorn. I was born and raised in Austin. And in case my dad hears this, I'm really a Longhorn first, okay? And then I'm also a Sun Devil.
There's some dual loyalties there, I think.
We take our sports very serious here in Texas.
Absolutely. And I'm actually, of the two colleges that I went to, ASU is the only one that has a mascot. My undergraduate college does not have a mascot. It is a women's only college, and we just don't have a mascot. We're just the Hollins University. Sun Devil is the only mascot I can lay claim to. So I'm a Sun Devil. Bill looks absolutely just perturbed by that.
So if one attends Arizona State University, as you both did, yes, you are a Sun Devil.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what does a Sun Devil look like?
Really fierce little guy with a pitchfork.
Pitchfork is what it comes to mind, yes.
Okay.
Pitchfork.
If you went to the women's basketball team, would there be somebody walking around with a Sun Devil head on and a pitchfork?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually spent a lot of time going to the Sun Devil women's basketball because the guy I was dating back then was a huge Sun Devils women's basketball fan. So I went to a ton of Sun Devils basketball games. Yes, you are not wrong about any of what you just said.
I thought for sure you were going to say you were dating the guy that wore the red fuzzy hat with the pitchfork. For sure.
Dave would have loved that. Actually, I think he would have. I think he would have eaten that up with a spoon. And hi, Dave. I know you're listening. Go Sun Devils.
Okay. See, I feel better now. I have a clearer understanding of your shared history. You and Ashley are both Sun Devils.
Yes, we are.
And Longhorns. We can't forget.
Before we get, now that we've gotten that out of the way, Ashley, tell us a little bit about yourself, please, and the amazing advocacy work that you're doing.
Yes, thank you so much. My time at Arizona State was a little bit short-lived. I was really excited to go there. I loved the school, and I was about to start my sophomore year at Arizona State, actually. And what I'm about to say might be a little bit triggering. I always just like to give that preface about sexual assault, but I think it's really important that we have these conversations. I had gone there for my freshman year. I loved it. And I was about to start my sophomore year in 2003. I went to college early just to get to know my new roommate. I was really excited. We were going into our first apartment. We were out of the dorms and I felt so cool. And so we were really excited to get settled in, but we were in a really giant apartment complex. You know this too, Kristin, it's very college oriented. So I was there before school started and it was pretty empty at the time in this big giant apartment complex. And they moved us into the very back corner ground floor unit. I will never forget it, Building K. It's etched in my memory. This was before school had started and I had been there about a week. I went to bed one night. I had a feeling that day. It was really strange. I had this feeling. I was on the phone with my mom and it was a warm summer Arizona night. And I just remember the sky was like pink and purple and started to get blue and the sun was setting. And as I'm speaking to my mom on the phone, I just felt this sinking feeling in the pit of my gut. Now, it wasn't like, I don't know if y'all know, like that anxious feeling where you feel like it's in your chest, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? It wasn't that. It was like this piercing, grounded, dark inner knowing that something was really terribly wrong, but I had no idea what it was. And as the sun went down, I talked to my mom, and I remember thinking, I don't want to get off the phone. I don't even want to go. I was supposed to meet up with my friends. I didn't know. I had no idea. I'm like, I'm going to be in trouble for going out in college. I had no idea, but I knew something was wrong. I hang up the phone, I go out with my friends, we come back to my apartment, and it started to get late. We were all talking, and I remember I had told my friends, like, why don't you just stay here? Some of you can stay in the bed, we have the couch. And my roommate went to sleep with her boyfriend, and eventually my friends left. They took a cab and they went home. And I went to bed that night, as I, for my whole life, have been fortunate to. I felt like I was safe in my own home. I'm very blessed in that I came from a safe environment. I always felt protected. I never in a million years, much probably like what you all have endured, imagined that these horrific crimes would ever happen to me. But they do. They can happen to anyone. I went to bed, and in the middle of the night, an intruder broke into my apartment while I was asleep. He smothered my face with a pillow and began to tear off my clothes. I remember just thinking, this is a dream. Those nightmares you have, and you can shake yourself and wake up. And I kept being like, wake up, Ashley, wake up, trying to shake myself. And I realized really quickly, oh my God, this is not a dream. This is real life, and I need to fight. And in that moment, I began to try to fight and yell and move my arms and legs with everything I had in me, and I was nearly killed. The pillow was suffocating my face so tightly. I tried to move my face all around, and I was beaten so severely. And I knew in that moment, I just thought, I have two choices. I continue to fight and I die right here, right now. Or I have to let it happen to try to live. And I desperately wanted to live. So for hours throughout the night, I endured this torture in every unimaginable way possible. The entire time, I could not see the face of the person that was committing these horrific crimes against me. I'm so fortunate because I am standing here today. I'm able to share my story. I survived it physically, but he got away and I never saw his face. And before he left, he said, do not remove the pillow from your face until I'm gone. And do not tell anybody, because if you do, I will be watching you and I will kill you. I was trembling, but I thought, oh my God, I'm going to survive. I might survive. And I had to just use my senses. When I felt like he was gone, I jumped out of bed. I slammed the door shut, locked it. I put on clothes, and I desperately looked for my phone. I knew I went to bed with it, but it was gone. So I had to think quick. I had to get out of that apartment. So I broke the window. I jumped out the window and ran to my roommate's master patio door. And I was just beating the door down, and she opened the door, and I will never forget the look on her and her boyfriend's face. I'm standing there covered in blood, just screaming, I've been raped, call 911, I've been raped. And I was fortunate. I had a really good responding law enforcement officer, Williams, and I was pacing in the parking lot. I didn't want to go inside. And when we met eyes, he pulled up in the police car, and it felt like it was months. I don't know how long it was, but it felt like it had been a really long time. And locked eyes, and I could just see him mouth the words, oh my God, when he saw the state I was in. And I mean, I worked day and night with detectives. I had a rape kit examination done. I did everything, but there were just no leads.
What agency were you dealing with at the time of the attack? Who was the responsible law enforcement agency?
So I was in Tempe at the time of the attack. And he was amazing. And I tell people this all the time. It is so important. Every single victim needs to have that first initial response be someone that is either trauma-informed, trained, or that has that compassion, because had it not been him, I would not have felt safe enough to go forward. I truly wouldn't have. I would have been scared to death. Because of him, he opened up the safety for me to take the next step, to have a rape kit examination done.
Did you go to the hospital right away then to do your rape kit? Tell us a little bit more about how the rest of the evening unfolds then once you've reported the sexual assault.
Yeah, so this was the morning. This was like morning, daytime at that point. And I remember I had gone back into the house when the police officer arrived, and I saw in front of my roommate's door was a barricade of stools and pillows and all these items from my house that this guy had put in front of the roommate's door because it opened outward. So he wanted to be able to have some notice if anyone was coming down.
Right.
So I saw that. I was pretty startled by that. And I just remember him saying, we have to act quick. He didn't really say these words to me, but after the fact, he knew that there was no eyesight evidence. I didn't see him. So they needed to get any evidence possible, any DNA, anything that they could find. I knew nothing about rape kits. I didn't know anything about it. I don't even know if CFI was around at the time. Like, I didn't know anything about the process at all. I remember just saying, he was like, we're going to take you in a van and we need to go and have evidence collected and get you checked out. And I remember I just said, oh, I have to shower first. I'm not going anywhere. I need to take a shower. I need to brush my teeth. I feel disgusting. Like I was just felt disgusting. And he just said, I'm so sorry. You can't shower.
Right.
You can't brush your teeth, but you're going to be safe. And again, I trusted him. So I got in a van and I went to a hospital, and I was very fortunate once again. I had I didn't know anything about SANE, a sexual assault nurse examiner, and she was changed. Her name was Jennifer. And I can tell y'all, I don't remember the hours of evidence collection, photographing. I don't remember that. I do remember, though, how she made me feel. And after an attack this traumatic, but any attack is traumatic, any sort of one, you can imagine having to get undressed and to have evidence like taken off your body. It would be really just terrible. But for me, the experience, she made me feel calm. She made me feel supported. She was compassionate, like all these amazing, I call them my angels, because I know not everybody has had this experience, but I want to share it because there is good out there. And I think this should be the model, the level that we all achieve and strive for. And so she worked very hard. And what we would find out down the road was that this guy was very good at what he did, as a lot of these very serial predators are. I've heard you speak about this too, but maybe not book smart, but smart, criminal smart. Okay. It's scary. It's different, but he's smart. So she would end up getting the evidence, which was a tiny bit of saliva on my chest. And this is graphic, but he was pretty good at protecting everything else and all the other evidence, even through these violent attacks. So that was the small evidence that ended up being collected, but I didn't know much about it. But so what they do then is they take your kit, and hopefully if all goes right and there's not backlogs, it gets tested, it gets stored properly, it's not destroyed, it's taken care of very well. And luckily that happened to mine, and it was entered though into CODIS, and there were no hits. The detectives working on my case were fantastic, and I think they collected DNA from over 50 people that would actually give their DNA, or they chased them down, because you can obtain DNA off a cup or whatever it is. But all these guys were actually giving up their DNA. And at this point, we ran out of people because school hadn't started yet. We took DNA from everybody, possibly every male that I thought possibly could have been at school around. They gave their DNA and there were no matches. And I couldn't take it anymore. I can tell you, the fear was so scary that I thought, not only am I all over the news, he told me he would be watching me. He said, if I told anyone, he's going to kill me. And now there's no leads. I'm terrified. I lived in a state of perpetual fear. And I tried to go to school, and I sat in class, and I had this horrific panic attack. And I just thought, is he sitting behind me right now?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Could he be in the same lecture hall with you?
Is he? I just lived in the state of absolute terror, and I couldn't even do things like wash my face because it would mean I would shut my eyes. Now, when I look back on it, and as you all know, your stories it breaks my heart to lose a family member, a sister, to lose someone to violence. It's so unfair, and it breaks my heart. And for me, I didn't even realize the impact it had on everyone that I went to school with. How terrifying. We're 19. We're kids.
In the end, did you end up feeling like, I have to step away from school? This isn't going to work for me, even though I'm just entering my sophomore year, which should be a really exciting time?
Yes, I remember I was in this sort of state of, and this was before like PTSD was talked about. I didn't really know anything about that, but I was in this, I think of it as like a trance or a daze, just moving my body, going through emotion. And trauma, we have all had different traumatic experiences, but it can infect the brain and the body, and our response is the same. So I think we can all say in our own ways we've experienced some sort of reaction like that to the things that have happened to us. I just felt like a daze and one foot, like just surviving. I was just surviving. And I dropped out of school, and I remember I had to sit in the office, and the person I was telling at the school was not very compassionate. I don't know if they were worried because it was a campus. I don't know, but it was handled really bizarrely, I would say. But I just dropped out of school. I couldn't do it anymore. I was all bruised up trying to go to school. Everyone's staring at me. I'm all over the news. And it stripped away I will never be the same. And I think I heard you, Bill, talk about this as well. It's you can go back to those places. And I was in it for a long time, like scary, which I'll touch. It changes you forever. And it doesn't mean that you're broken per se, but you lose a part of yourself that you can't ever get back. And I refer to this kind of because now it's 2003 and I've had closure. I've been doing healing work, I've tried every healing, anything you could imagine I've tried. But there are times when I think that it's a scar. And then all of a sudden something will happen. And then I feel like it's like a gaping deep wound that's bleeding. I don't know if that makes sense, but you feel like I've healed, and then all of a sudden it's just, it's there again. It's alive. It's painful. It's dark. It's hard, but we have to face it and choose to look for the good things in the light. And I dropped out of school and I picked Newport Beach, California to live at. I moved there with my friend, and it was a random place. I'd never thought about living, but I'm like, I'm going to the ocean. I'm just going to be Ashley. No more victim. No one's going to know. I'm not going to talk about it. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to start fresh. And it's not that easy to restart, but so I moved to Newport Beach. I struggled. On the outside, you might think I was okay, but my roommate knew the darkness, and bless her. I mean, what she endured and how she stuck through me. She was an angel. I thought I was doing okay, but I mean, I was numbing out with massive amounts of alcohol, pills, NyQuil during the day because I couldn't sleep at night. I would hear like muffled screams of women that he was hurting. I knew he was out there. Like that was the most awful thing for me was I could hear how I was trying to scream in that pillow, but I would hear it on repeat in my head at night because I knew he was out there. And we know these people do not stop. They don't stop. They don't wake up one day and say, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to violently rape and break into people's homes or kill people. I'm just decided I'm not doing that. That doesn't happen. Let's be real. So that was terrifying for me. And I can remember not just one time, but there were 2 times that I would peel my eyes open, and it was like I felt like I had been hit over the head with a brick. My eye is hazy, and I could see, I pry my eye open with a pounding migraine, and I would see a hospital band on my wrist. And I wouldn't remember not only not going in an ambulance from the bar because I overdrank, I wouldn't remember being cleared to go home. Okay. Like it was absolutely terrifying. And I won't go into this whole story, but I ended up getting into yoga. My mom had done it and my friend took me there, and I started to get more clear. Like yoga gave me this clarity of healing, and it was a pathway for me that really worked. And I started to be able to feel my pain, to process it, to let go, and to know that some things I have to surrender to. Sometimes the power is just surrendering and accepting that I can either continue to self-medicate and kill myself, or I can take this and put one foot in front of the other, get my head clear and start my life. No more victim mentality, pick up the pieces. It got to that point, and I said, I can't live like this anymore. So I got clear-headed. I ended up going back to college. I got a job. I graduated college. It was really awesome. And it's a big deal. And I decided to move back to Austin eventually. And it was here in 2010. So 7 years after my attack, I get a call from the detectives, and there was a DNA match in my case.
Wow.
After 7 years, I endured such a wide range of emotion. I was shocked because in order to get on with my life, I had decided, you know what, I just am accepting that I might not ever have an answer to this. And so it was shocking. The irony is I moved to Newport Beach out of all the places in the country to escape this man. In reality, I moved to the very city that he lived. Newport Beach, have you all been there to Newport Beach?
Yes.
No, I haven't been.
Okay, it's a tiny beach town. Tiny, okay? So I lived on the peninsula on 40th Street.
I know
When
it.
they arrested him, guess what? He was on 41st Street, 1 block from where I live.
This is a complete
my
coincidence.
God.
This is not him following you or anything like that.
It's bizarre. No, he actually told the court that I followed him there. I don't know. He said that I saw him, that I went to like restaurants that he was in, that he saw me on the peninsula. There was a time like in my Jeep, there were photographs from like a rooftop taken and put in the front seat of my car. And I called the detective on my case thinking, I don't know if it's connected. I still will never know. But whether or not like he saw me out or he was just saying that, it's just eerie. It's just one of those weird,
Wow.
what? I don't know. It doesn't make total sense, but there's a reason that it was a blessing. He was caught in Newport Beach trying to break into a home 1 block from where I lived all those years. He was tinkering with the door. 3 young women lived in this home. A police officer saw him, questioned him, then tried to arrest him. He resisted the officer's arrest. In California, that's a felony offense. Thankfully, California was one of just 18 at the time. My home state of Texas, we just became the 19th state. I'm so proud to collect DNA upon all felony arrest. So the difference is 50 states, so all 50 collect upon conviction of a felony. 31 states, Virginia is included in this, 31 states collect for certain violent felony arrest and burglary. Of those, 19 do all felony arrests. California was one of the states at the time. Thankfully, it was in California that he was arrested, because what they did was when they took him down, they took his fingerprints, they took his photographs, they took a DNA cheek swab. So it's a minimally invasive cheek swab of saliva.
Yep.
They uploaded into CODIS, our national database, and it hit and matched back to my case all those years before and others. My DNA evidence was strongest, so they were going to trial with mine first. He was a violent serial predator. He had a wife and a son and a shed behind his home full of women's underwear and ID cards, like his trophies from all over the world. He would take odd jobs painting. He went to the Olympics. The amount of people that he has harmed, we will not ever know. And I can tell you there is a reason why too, because the level of fear he instills in his victims is next level. That was my automatic response. Go tell. I can see many circumstances where people are not telling, or it takes them a while, or they're not coming out. But he had trophies of all these women in there. So they arrested him. He was extradited to Arizona. But as the law stands in Arizona today, he would still be free to rape and harm other women because they wouldn't have taken his cheek swab there, right? Anyways, I wait on trial for 5 years. So 2010 to 2015.
Wait, let's stop for a second. Why did you have to wait 5 years for a trial?
Two big reasons. One, this guy he's insane, and he thought he wanted to represent himself. And so again, as we're saying, he might not have been the smartest businessman, but he was criminal smart. He knew how to play the system. So he represented himself. But the really big reason, the most important one, is that there was a Supreme Court case. 2013, there is a case called Maryland versus King. In this, they found that taking your DNA cheek swab for a qualifying arrest is a reasonable and just part of the booking procedure, just like taking your fingerprints, just like taking your photographs. So this was challenged, that it was a violation of the Fourth Amendment. They found no, that it is not a violation of the Fourth Amendment for qualifying arrest. So because of that ruling, thank goodness, we were able to go to trial. Had that ruling not gone that way, I would have never had this closure. This man could have still been out there. Because of that, trial was postponed, but then we went, and I remember, I'll never forget it. At this point, I had yoga studios in Austin, and I gave birth to my son. All these big achievements for me that I never thought could be possible again. When I had trouble getting pregnant with my son, and I remember the prosecutor called and he said, Ashley, trial is happening May of 2015, and there's no going back. We're going to trial. And I just was on the phone wait, my business, we're finally turning a profit. You know how hard that is? I'm not crying on the steps anymore, inviting homeless people to come take my yoga class for free just to fill the room. This is a big deal. When I had a son, and I said, he's 8 months old. That's too young. He can't be separated from me. I'm his mom. Deep down, I was just terrified. This guy told me he would kill me, and now I'm a mama and I have a child to protect. If they find him not guilty, it's just, I never saw his face. I don't know this guy. He was a stalker and a stranger. I'd never seen him before. It really scared me. And he said, Ashley, if you don't show up, he was really kind about it, but he said very directly, the maximum this man can get is 10 years. And I said, I'm going to have to think about it. I hung up the phone, went about my business, and I remember I got the shocking news that I was pregnant, and just a complete and total shock. And so with my son, we didn't find out the sex, but with this child, the surprise, you're pregnant, when I didn't think I could get pregnant on my own, and I was. And I'll never forget when I just got the letter and it just said, you're having a baby girl. And I thought, oh my gosh, Ashley, because you're going back for her. You're going back for everyone's daughter, sisters, friends. You are going to trial. So pregnant as can be with my daughter, I fly to Arizona when I faced this man, and there was a lot of darkness, but I persevered through, and there was a lot of light. The officer, the forensic nurse, the DNA analyst, they were able to prove purely through DNA, it was 38 trillion times more likely his DNA on me than anybody else's. Okay, 38 trillion. The real compelling evidence in court was by 2010, they were able to do what is called YSTR analysis. And what they did was they extracted the X and the Y chromosome. When they did that, they retested the DNA, and they found his DNA all over my body, everywhere. And guess what? It aligned with every story that I told detectives and law enforcement immediately after the attack, which made for extremely compelling evidence in court. So they found him guilty. We waited on sentencing for a year. So this was May of 2016. At this point, my daughter was born. I fly back to Arizona for sentencing. I'll never forget, the prosecutor says, "Ashley, this man's family is here." And I just start sobbing because it humanized him. And I'm like, no, like he's a monster. I don't want him to be human at all. It broke my heart. And he said, "They are here, but they're here in support of you." And I said, "What?" And he said, "And they want to know if they can talk to you." And I just said, okay, tears falling down my face. And this one gets me. I don't cry a lot when I talk anymore, but this always makes me choke up because I'll never forget hugging his sister and his nieces and his family and us just sharing how sorry we were for one another, all crying in each other's arms. Powerful. And his sister stood up that day at sentencing, his own sister, and she looked the judge straight in the eye and she said, "I grew up with this man as a brother. I had to become a detective because I had to live with him as my brother. Not only is what he did horrific to her, but we are certain that he has killed people. Do not ever let him see the light of day again." His own sister. There was a man that kind of made me feel uncomfortable that sat behind in trial. And so you have this amazing victim advocate that holds the hand of a stranger. Rhonda, I love her so much. I always think of Help Me, Rhonda. She really helped me in that song. She was a little angel too. And she went to ask him, she said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I grew up with this guy in high school and I drove all the way here from California to see him fry. He is a bad man." So,
wow. So he wasn't there to show support either.
And he had been in and out of trouble of burglary, voyeurism, never had his DNA collected, but he's not getting caught for the homicides. His sister says she's certain that he's murdered people, okay? And in my evidence, it was the small amount of saliva that actually they got it off of. But they actually sentenced him to 137.5 years in prison.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder.
I sat in the back of court and I just sobbed, and I felt like this weight of justice. That peace that I felt, I thought when I flew home and I ended up reconnecting with my forensic nurse, and I thought, you know what? I can't live in silence. I never told anybody. My own brother, who was very close to me, he was so young at the time. We just said that someone broke in and robbed my house. I'm going to start telling people, and all victims deserve justice. Every single one. Every single victim deserves closure. We can't stop it all from happening, but we need to do everything we can. And I was terrified when I realized that every state did not collect DNA upon felony arrest.
Right.
50 conviction. How many of these people are getting convicted of these felonies? They get it taken down to a misdemeanor, they flee. The most prolific serial rapist of young girls in Colorado was caught not through serial raping young girls. He was caught through a felony level forgery. Okay? So we're not talking about swabbing DNA for a routine traffic stop, okay? That's illegal. But we are saying if you are arrested for a violent felony offense, we need to collect your DNA. It's interesting because now I advocate for this with DNA Justice Project. I formed it to not just, help with victim advocacy, but try to change laws. And I got inspired in 2017, actually. I was testifying in Texas just on the side to try to get it to certain violent felonies. It didn't go in 2017, 2019, it got across. And I met this woman named Jan Sepich. I don't know if you all are familiar with her or her daughter's story. So Jan's wonderful. And her daughter, Katie Sepich, was a 23-year-old grad student in New Mexico in 2003, so the same year of my attack. Her story did not end as well. She was walking home from a party. She had gotten in an argument with her boyfriend. She left, and she was walking alone at night, and she ended up being very brutally raped, murdered. Her body was lit on fire, and she was dumped in a field.
Oh, my gosh.
Horrible. She had, and you've lived through this, the effect. She had siblings, a sister, a young sister. I think she was 9 at the time, and an older brother, and they did not know who did it. For a while, they thought maybe it was the boyfriend because they had gotten in that argument. But I remember when Jan tells this story, she said very directly to the law enforcement officer. So Katie the stories that you hear of her and meeting her mother, when you know her, she's become like a second mom to me. Katie was a fighter. And the only evidence that they had, because her body was burned, was actually under her fingernails. She had fought for her life so hard that the DNA was under her fingernails. So they were able to collect that. And Jan told the detective, this guy, he'll do it again. People like this don't just stop, like we all know. And when they arrest him for another felony, they'll just take his DNA and then we'll find the match. We're going to find this guy. And the detective just said, no, you can't. That's illegal to take DNA upon felony arrest, and explained to her. And she felt gutted. So 3 years later, her perpetrator was actually convicted of a felony, and that is when they swabbed him for DNA. And they found that had they had the law, which is now called CODIS law in Mexico, Jan is a fierce warrior with her husband, Dave, and kids, and they fought for this. CODIS law there, it saved many lives. But had they had that law, her family would have had justice 2 months after her murder instead of 3 years. And you know the pain, and I can't imagine 30 plus years of waiting, but to not have that closure and to know that there are loopholes that we have today in our criminal justice system and in the way that we can actually make this change, like we can. So she fought for that. She trained me, and she's since retired. So she entrusted me to step into her big, the big wings of her. But I carry Katie's memory, and I will be carrying your sisters as well in this work, because we can't give up hope. We have the tools. We have these DNA databases that are incredible. CODIS is incredible. My greatest challenge is trying to convince legislatures on why we need to do this. But I'm like, why don't we all need to be doing this? It's crazy to me. It's absolutely crazy. It makes no sense. I get it though, because people say, if you collect my DNA before I'm convicted, that's a violation of my civil liberties. I hear that a lot, and here's why it's not. And I love when people come with these challenges, because I've really studied. I was no forensic expert before this. I was a yoga girl that had a business. I mean, I ran a studio. I had some, but not this. Come on.
Sure.
But I just began to get fascinated with the database and learn why and study the ins and outs of it. And CODIS, so if you don't mind me going into this really quick, it's been around since 1998. It links the local, state, and national DNA databases. Since 1998, we have never had a breach into the database, okay? Now, even if someone were to break into the database, all they would find are numbers. So people think that CODIS is like 23andMe, Ancestry.com, and forensic genealogy is doing incredible things to solve crimes. It's amazing, but that is not what this is. And I think this is important to talk to in what CODIS is. That is not it at all. So what goes into CODIS is not your whole DNA genome made up of 3 billion markers. So markers are 2 sets of numbers, okay? So 3 billion of those, that's all of our information. It wouldn't say in CODIS, if I were to get arrested for felony, it wouldn't say that I am Lebanese, that I have brown hair, if I'm predisposed to any genetic diseases. It wouldn't say my siblings, unless you have familial CODIS laws in place that allow that, but that's not even what we're talking about. It wouldn't say even a name. So the only thing it has, it's an auto-generated specimen ID number that is given by the lab. So these numbers are so precise that there's 20 to 24 depending on the state, but it doesn't say any coding information. The only thing you could tell if you knew how to read it would be male or female. That's it, okay? Now, the second part, you guys still with me? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Keep going.
So much. I love this stuff. So you just stop me whenever. But okay, so the second part is, where are the names stored then? Okay, so if there is an actual match into the database of those numbers, the names are stored actually in an offline computer at the state lab. So these are the state owns wholly what goes into CODIS in the database. Okay, that's important too. So what happens then is there's a match. The name is kept in this offline computer. They reaffirm, they retest, okay, that is a match. So the person that owns this computer, there's only a limited number of people that have access to it. There are heavy fines of upwards to 100, some states $250,000 if you violate this, and jail time if you violate the privacy. They can release the name to the detectives working the case. They can only use this DNA match as an investigative lead. So they have to build their own case. They have to get a search warrant for the arrest for the second swab of DNA. They re-swab, they put it into CODIS, and that, if that matches, that is the DNA that is admissible in court. So very protected, and it's very accurate. Now, if you are found not guilty for whatever reason, you're not guilty. It is a federal law and requirement. You have to be able to have your DNA completely expunged and destroyed from the database. So the Office of the Inspector General does annual and random audits on the crime lab. And again, there are heavy fines if it's violated. So I tell people, do you believe in fingerprinting? And some of them say no. And I just say, oh, I don't know what to tell you, but if you believe in fingerprinting, then you should believe in this because it's even more accurate. And why are we not maximizing this? Because not only can it provide justice to families like yours that are desperately waiting and not giving up hope, it can prevent these crimes from happening to our children. It exonerates those that are wrongfully in our prison, and it protects the civil liberties and the privacy of those that are arrested. Your DNA is not accessible by third parties. You can't look it up. You can't be prohibited from getting a job by having your DNA in the database. The only thing that's public is your arrest record, and that's going to be public. But your DNA, it's not.
Why is it that there are so many violent offenders that just aren't in the CODIS system? What is the problem here? Because this sounds like a great system. What is going on that we're not having every violent offender put into CODIS? Please help us understand that really crucial question.
There's many reasons, unfortunately, that I keep learning more and more, but I like to look at these as opportunities of growth, shed light so that we can work towards fixing them. For one, the DNA collection laws. So states just aren't collecting unless it's a conviction of a felony. That's not good. Honestly, we are missing the bulk of these people. Okay. We have answers that can be given today if we start to collect for all felony arrests. That's when I think a good stepping stone is if your state's newer to it, but up north and where y'all are, I'm really eager to get stuff going. I have a bill still in West Virginia, but it didn't go as well in the House. The Senate side, I have Senator Oliverio, who's amazing. He's resurrected it. He believes in it so much. He's such a fighter for good, and I'm so grateful to him, no matter the outcome, because he's brought it back to life. Pennsylvania have incredible sponsors, Kentucky, but up north, we don't have a lot of this. It's all, I have a map and I have it color coordinated, dark blue for all felony arrests, light blue for violent felonies, and then white. And up north, all white, basically, because you only do conviction. And these criminals, they don't stay their lane or their state. They are on the move. And so we need to do this. We will solve so many crimes, so many. So that's one area. Another one is we have incredible technology at our fingertips as well, as you all know, too, whether there's different advancements with forensic genealogy. Again, I don't know as much about that, but I do know things. I had a bill in Arkansas. We did a working group. There's technology called rapid DNA technology. To give you some background, we have an issue. I was shocked to find out the Department of Justice estimates that we are missing per state between 40 to 50,000 samples of lawfully owed DNA or uncollected offender DNA. So what does this mean? It means as the law stands for conviction or for violent felony arrest or whatever your law is in your state, we're missing on average per state 40 to 50,000 samples. Process that. These are not just samples. These are violent repeat offenders, and we could close a lot of cases, but we have to be swabbing for the DNA. It's just like the rape kit backlog. It's amazing. There are all these organizations that have done great work, Joyful Heart Foundation, RAIN, incredible things, but we can do all this work on clearing the backlog, but if we're not utilizing the other side of the coin, the DNA database, we will not get the hits. So we have to enhance our DNA database. So with lawfully owed, why does this happen? There's a multitude of reasons. It's hard to pinpoint just one. One, offender flees. Two, there's unclear communication. They don't know that they're supposed to give their DNA. Three, sometimes people are in prison and they're supposed to give their DNA after their prison sentence. Okay, make that make sense to me. After. So some people are in there for 20 years and then you're just going to take their DNA. Also, what if they're innocent? But think of the other crimes that you can close, the other offenses, if you're collecting the DNA up front. So we're also missing them in prison. Some people aren't trained there, so they don't know. There's miscommunication amongst agencies. And so these people are being missed in the system. It breaks my heart. And this is something that everyone should uncover. And Alaska did their numbers and they're small population wise, and they had 21,000 lawfully owed DNA samples. In Arkansas, when I was there for the working group, which I'm going to retouch on, they had 42,000 samples that were missing. So the list goes on. This is a real issue and we can't point fingers, but we need to say, why is this happening? And we need to make some solutions. Okay. One of the solutions, it's just a tool too, but you have more updates in technology. There's rapid DNA technology. Louisiana, I just got back from visiting there a few months ago and we just launched this in Arkansas. So it's a technology. It looks like a printer. Okay. It's a tiny size. If you have the policy, which is to collect DNA upon arrest and booking, so you have to be able to collect DNA when you're booking someone. You can actually take a cheek swab when you take their fingerprints and their photographs, you upload it into the national database, and it counts down within 90 minutes. It can turn green, and if they are linked to any of the most violent offenses unsolved in the DISC nationwide, then we will know right away. Within 24 hours, it can search all of CODIS. Right now, we know it can take weeks, months, sometimes years. You have the ability. And again, these are just tools, right? But this could help with lawfully owned DNA because they're not fleeing, and it can help make really good decisions on bail and bond and things of that nature. It can exonerate people really quickly. So there's that. There is also, it's pretty disheartening to know that sometimes our CODIS hits actually aren't followed up on. There's now a company that they have hit tracking systems in. So sometimes, and again, whether it's from the lab side or law enforcement, we're missing, there could be a ding. There's a link, a hit to CODIS, like a violent homicide or sexual assault, and it gets missed for whatever reason. And so I'm working on some legislation in a few states to try to make an accountability process so that within 5 days of finding the hit, the lab has to inform and vice versa, because there are just so many loopholes, and we have great systems in place, and we do have great people doing these jobs. And I've toured some of the most fantastic labs in the country, but we have to keep evolving because this means that people will not have justice and they will sit. When we can find solutions, we can find answers, we can find the truth.
Do you think the CODIS system is irreparably broken? Is this too much damage to fix? Or is there a way to make this system workable to the extent that we can get justice for everybody who deserves it?
I love CODIS because it's how I think my story is a way of how it can work really well, right? We know that there are loopholes, but CODIS in itself is one of the most powerful tools for law enforcement today. It's how we are solving it. But the more we can enhance our DNA in the database, this is where the loophole is for me. We have to continue to enhance the DNA in the database in a just way. The more we continue to enhance the DNA in the database, the more hits we're going to get. The right people will get the wrong people off the street. We'll also save money. This cares, like, to legislators. They want to know, why is this important? Dr. Jennifer Dilley, I did a great study. She's done a lot of them. She's fantastic. If anyone wants to study more on arrestee legislation and the power of it, she's great. And she found that for every 30, so the swab samples, the kits that you put into CODIS, they can cost between $35 to $50, depending on the state. For every sample that's put into the CODIS, we prevent 0.57 crimes. Because of that crime prevention, the taxpayer sees $27,000 in savings. I tell people, you save money, you save lives. Come on, it's a win. You give justice to people. But the problem is not CODIS. CODIS is fantastic in my opinion. But the problem is we are not getting the DNA that we need into CODIS. We're going to get more hits. The more we get it in there, the more hits we're going to get.
And tell me Jennifer's last name again, the person that authored the study.
Dr. Jennifer Doleac, Doleac. She's fantastic.
Do you know why the rules for CODIS seem to vary from state to state? Why do we not have the same set of rules across all 50 states? That just seems like that would be a really good place to start for all of us so that we're all on even footing. Let's all have the same rules for every single state. What's the deal on that?
That's a great question. State law, you have to do it state, but in UK, they do it. UK, it's federal. And federally, if you're arrested for any crime at the federal level like that, your DNA is taken. So it's federally, you already do that. You have to do this. But state to state, I wish I had the answer. I think a lot of the constituents, okay, and maybe even a lot of listeners think, don't we already do this? Don't we already collect DNA? If you're arrested, don't you do that? But no, we don't. It's a tough battle. It really is. Still, to see the map and to see so many states fighting to not have DNA, which I think is a totally protected, it's a great system. It can help eliminate racial bias because we're not talking if there's no coding information. It's not a photo ID. I have a friend, James Calvin Tillman, if you want to look him up and be inspired, but his story is horrible. We met at the California Department of Justice speaking on the power of DNA. He was victimized in a way that I can't imagine. He was a young boy. I think he was like 18 or 19, and his mom was making a mistake, and there's a knock at the door, and you hear him tell the story and it just breaks your heart. The steak is sizzling and they say, Mr. Tillman, come with us. You're arrested for the rape of this woman. And he says, Mom, hold my steak. I didn't do it. 18 years later. 18 years of his life. And actually, the man that committed the rape was in prison at one time with him and knew that Mr. Tillman was serving time for this rape, and this guy did it. Okay. So 18 years. He wrote a book on the power of conviction and faith and forgiveness. I don't know how he did that, but the Connecticut Innocent Project kept pushing, test the DNA. They hadn't tested it. Finally tested it. It exonerated him. But after all that time, he was the very first person to be exonerated by DNA in the state of Connecticut. So this is what I'm saying. We have good systems in place, but we are not utilizing them. There's so many loopholes. We have to fix them.
Even recently in the Colonial Parkway murders, our big break came because a sexual assault kit initiative grant was applied for by the Department of Forensic Science and the Virginia State Police, which is something we've been asking for a number of years. They finally get the grant. They run the tests, and they identify Alan Wade Wilmer Sr. as the offender in one of the double homicides in the Colonial Parkway murders. So Robin Edwards and David Knobling's killer is identified. And then at the same time, in checking other unsolved cases in the area, they discover that this man is also responsible for the 1989 murder of Teresa Howell. So this is another situation where if we conduct DNA testing, we find that we can identify offenders, and hopefully more cases will be solved. This man's never going to prison. He died in 2017. But as Kristin and I have said many times on the podcast, getting answers is incredibly important when you've been waiting, in some cases, more than 30 years for answers in these unsolved homicides.
Incredibly important. And I can't imagine just the pain of that. It's unimaginable. I'm so sorry. And we might not be able to stop every crime or solve, but we can solve a lot of them by testing this evidence. We can. The DNA it's key. DNA is science. It's accurate. It's truth. And yes, you have to have the whole investigation with it, but it's such a good, solid system. We have to continue to maximize it. We just do. We will be able to close a lot of these cases out. So a good example of this is with the arrestee legislation. So Texas, my home state, we in 2019, when it got across, it was pretty divisive, honestly, it was hard to get past. And I was still pretty new at the time to this. I still am in the scheme of things, but you learn quick when you're thrown in the fire with legislators, let me tell you that. So we got it across in 2019 for certain violent felonies and burglaries. So in the first year of that, we closed over 230 cases that were cold. 2021, fast forward, over 640 cold cases closed through this. Wow. So we go back, huge. So we go back, the proof is in the numbers. We're saving lives. We're closing cases a lot. We saw violent homicides that were cold cases, sexual assaults of children. So you see that it's working. You have an upfront investment from the state, but we're actually saving money because we're getting the right people. We're closing out the case. The time is the time that is put into these cases and what it costs. So we're doing that. Then we go back, and I expect it to have, because it's traditionally a little bit more, I don't know why it's more, what do you say? It has a little more drama behind it. People fight over it. The DNA legislation, it just does. So I was surprised and so grateful to see everyone voted it through. I didn't have anyone come to testify against it. We were allocated $14 million in funding from Governor Abbott just to get this program launched because they saw that it works. So the proof is in the system. Texas was a state that cares tremendously. They still do with civil liberties, right? But they realize this is not affecting it at all. In fact, we are closing cases. We're saving money. We're saving lives. Like it's a win. I love to share that because it shows the proof. It works. And that's why I tell states that I try to get this legislation passed. Start here then, if anything. Start with certain violent felonies and burglaries. We're still not going to get them all, right? Because they're doing my guy, resisting the officer. But you're going to start to get more. And then people develop trust in the system. They see it. We're going to give justice to people that are waiting for it. It works.
Ashley, this is amazing work that you're doing. And obviously you have a lot of passion behind this, which is so admirable. And I'm really in awe of you right now. What is next for you in terms of projects? What do the next couple of months, and probably I'm imagining you're scheduled out the next couple of years, looking like for you?
I'm just riding the wave of a higher power. I don't know. You could have never told me. I could have never picked this out to be my life in the first place, but yeah. I'm going to keep fighting. It's been an emotional legislative session, and that's why the wins are so sweet, because you have to fight and you lose. I lose a lot in this, and it always breaks my heart a little bit, to be honest. And it's raw and it's real, and it can be very lonely on the road, but I'm doing it. I hope one day that we get your sister's perpetrator. That's going to be a life mission of mine too, because there are good people out there fighting, and so I'm going to keep up this fight wherever it takes me. Hopefully we'll have some success with some states up north getting some legislation passed, and I'm just going to keep trying to educate along the way.
Ashley Spence of the DNA Justice Project, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your story. It is very painful, but so ultimately heartening and inspiring. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
It is my true honor. Thank you so much.
And where can we find you online if we're interested in learning more about the DNA Justice Project?
Yes, I'm a one-woman show, so don't judge if I say that. I have a website, dnajusticeproject.org. Social media, I do that, and I do more updated on what's going on legislatively, news, and things of that nature. You can follow me there as well. I would be really grateful, and that's about it.
All right, Ashley, thank you so much. Thank you all so much for joining us for this episode of Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.